So today, for the first time, you can control your own narrative, right? Which is essentially the idea of a personal brand, whether that is on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all of them, a YouTube channel, Spotify podcast. For the first time, you can actually put out this video, right, for nearly no cost, right? And people would actually consume it. And community is an unfair advantage if you can crack. I'm very interested to see what role AI plays for creators, the creator economy.
Yeah.
Every weekend we watch memes as a family, right? That I curate, right? And lately I would say good 20-30% of the memes we're watching are AI generated.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am back yet again with my next guest. His name is Prahlad Jaya. Now, Prahlad runs one of the largest growing communities of VCs, founders, and startups in Southeast Asia called Curate. And apart from that, he is also leading growth at an equity management platform called Capita. Now, in this episode, we talk about personal branding, we talk about community, and we talk about events as growth playbooks for startups who are looking to 10x their growth in a very effective way. So if you're in the growth team of a startup, or if you're a founder who's looking to get started and who's looking to 10x their growth, then this episode is an absolutely must watch for you. It's filled with information, it's filled with exciting examples and great analysis. So watch to the very end and tell us what you loved about this episode. Until then, keep watching the Out of Office show. Welcome, Prahlad. Welcome back to the Out of Office show.
Great to be back.
So I love it because for those who don't know out here, Prahlad was my very first episode. He was my debut and you should watch the first episode, and if you watch, you will know what I mean. But I'm very grateful that Prahlad agreed to be my debut, where so many things went wrong, but we still launched the very first episode. So it's only right that I invite Prahlad back again, and this time go very, very deep into certain growth playbooks, right, Prahlad, that we can bring to this world for people who are in startups, who are figuring to grow their own businesses and really don't know what to do. Now, you have been in the space. You have built a huge community of over 1,000 VCs and founders in Singapore called Curate, right, over the last couple of years. I think, I don't know how much, 4 years, 5 years?
2 to 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, 2 to 3 years. And then now you're also helping another company called Capita grow their business. And so you've had a lot of experience and exposure to different strategies and methodologies. So today we're going to unlock everything. And yeah, you're ready.
I'm ready.
So how are you feeling today?
Amazing. This whole month has been crazy. This month has been the most eventful month, literally. The most number of events. Large, small.
Give me a sense of the scale.
So if you think about it, June first week or so, first week there were a couple of like internal events we did with a couple of our VC partners. A lot of people were in town, all their portfolio companies. Second week of June, Echelon happened, the most important conference for the regional startup ecosystem.
Yeah.
Although, compared to other events, it might seem a little less jazzy, it still attracts the most number of relevant folks from across SEA in the startup and VC world. So Echelon is an event that I've been part of for 2-3 years, know the team very well, been speaking over there. This time we did 2 different speaking gigs over there. One was a panel with a couple of up-and-coming VCs, new funds. The other one was all about AI agents with this company called the File AI, one of the more exciting startups in the space. Panel 1 fireside at Echelon, super fun, went very well. Then we also did a side event in partnership with Backscoop, which was I think 500-600 signups. As usual, we rejected more than half of them and kept it curated for founders and VCs. And we had folks from 8 different markets. It was amazing, all at the same time in Singapore. Rooftop party as always, right? So that went very well. And then the following week, there was Super AI, right? So Super AI is a little bit more global, a little bit more refined of an event where there was a lot happening. We didn't officially do anything, but I supported everything that was going on, attended it, met some great folks at Super AI. And finally, last week, I was in Jakarta for Tech in Asia. For the first time, they did what's called the Asia Economic Summit. So it's not your full-fledged Tech in Asia. It is a smaller, much more curated. It's very difficult to get free tickets. So it was actually a very high quality audience that attended, folks from government, folks from high finance, corporate VCs. It was quite a show. So that was in Jakarta. We did 2 different side events. One super curated, a masterclass workshop type of thing with only founders, CFOs, and HR folks of some leading startups over there. We also did what's called the Innovation Night with a bunch of partners in the region, which was a much larger scale with, I think, over 100 attendees right after Tech in Asia. So that was Jakarta, just got back yesterday. And I had a little gathering for my birthday yesterday. It's my golden birthday this week now.
What's a golden birthday?
Golden birthday is, I think my sister was the first one to tell me this. Golden birthday is when you turn, so in my case, when you turn 26 on June 26th, right? That's your golden birthday.
Oh, that is so cool. I didn't know about this.
Right? So we did a little gathering yesterday, got some close friends over, did a board games night. Been super exciting. I haven't had such a packed month ever before. And I guess it is physically exhausting at times, but it's totally my element. I've been in my element this entire month, so it's all in all, amazing.
Wow. It just sounds like a lot has been happening just from what you've said. But I'm really happy to know that there are so many things that are happening in Southeast Asia. In general, they have, and that you get to be a part of it. I want to double down on a couple of things here, right? So events have been a big part of your growth playbook. But apart from that, and this is from a previous conversation we both have been happening, we've chatted a lot about personal branding, we've chatted a lot about communities, and I mean, these are just pillars that kind of feed into each other, right? As things grow. So let's break this down for the audience. How can they make these 3 things, like business owners or growth teams in companies, can make this as a part of their playbook? So tell me first, what is your favorite of all these 3?
What's the 3? Personal branding?
Personal branding. There's community.
I would say let's start with personal branding.
Okay.
Let's start with personal branding.
Your favorite?
Yeah.
All right.
Because that kind of feeds into the other 2.
Okay.
Right? The first is, the other 2 are, the way I see it, an extension of the first. So it makes sense to start with personal branding. Yeah.
True. Very true. I think that it's like a funnel. It's like from here to that. Okay, cool.
A funnel is this way, but sure.
Personal branding. Okay, tell me more. Okay, let's break it down. What is personal branding? Okay, for the audience who's like, what is it? What is personal branding? And then we'll go into more about how you build it, what are the strategies you take, maybe create a playbook. So, what is your definition of personal branding?
I mean, I think everyone's familiar with the idea of personal branding. We all follow people who have personal brands. The way I see it, there's never been a time like today where you can totally own your distribution channel, right? Barring those who have been deplatformed and all that, for the most part, you own your distribution channel, which has never happened before, right? If you were a celebrity in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the media would cover you in a certain way. They shape the narrative. All you can do is influence that, have relationships with the mainstream media, but you don't actually control your own narrative.
Okay.
So today, for the first time, you can control your own narrative, right? Which is essentially the idea of a personal brand, whether that is on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on all of them, a YouTube channel, Spotify podcast. For the first time, you can actually put out this video, right, for nearly no cost, right? And people would actually consume it. And never before have you had such a platform. If you did this before, you'd have to depend on a radio station, a TV channel. So I think we're living in an amazing time. Media. And so that's the idea of a personal brand to me, owning that distribution channel and owning the narrative. Whatever the mediums would evolve, but the idea is owning the narrative.
Owning the narrative. And how does that, let's start with maybe what is really the benefit of owning your narrative and having a personal brand? How does that help you as a business owner, or how does that help you as a simple, a person who is probably employed somewhere working on something? Even from that perspective, how does that help you?
Have you watched Mad Men?
No.
Okay. One of my favorite TV shows. So Mad Men is a show all about the advertising agency world from 60s New York period piece. And I think we've come a long way in terms of what a brand is. Right? If you think about it, back then, very, very similar to what I said about media and distribution. The biggest brands were companies, were products, right? The P&Gs and Unilever brands,
Yeah,
right? Those
yeah.
were for the longest time your classical definition of a brand.
Yeah, like
right?
Lux and stuff.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Today, though, the idea of a brand itself is very different. I think it's still being shaped as we speak, but personal brands have never been more important if you think about it, right? Personal brands, D2C brands, right? Today, just like personal brands, you as a D2C brand owner can compete from day one against
Yeah.
the P&Gs and Unilevers of the world. Never before happened, right?
Yeah.
And that is without raising tons of VC money. I'm saying, like, just
Yeah.
today we can have something up on Shopify and launch tonight.
Yeah.
Right? A new
Yeah.
brand. You have distribution channels in the form of TikTok and Instagram. If it's a B2C business, all you need to do is go viral over there. If it's something more B2B professional, you have LinkedIn, all of that. And we can launch brands that directly compete with the incumbents in the space at a fraction of the cost or nearly no cost to start with. So that, I think, is the benefit of owning a distribution and hence personal branding.
What I want to understand is that personal brand is something that is very personal to you, and you are the face of the brand, right? How does that eventually impact, let's say, a business which has its own identity and its own brand, or a product in this case has its own identity and its own brand?
So back to the narrative thing, either you shape your own narrative or others will do it for you.
Okay.
Okay, whether that's mainstream media, whether it's your customers, whether it's spectators online. So the way I see it is there's nothing better than owning that narrative and keeping that and owning the story of your own brand, on your own business, and your own business is an extension of you, right? And we all follow influencers that we really appreciate, admire to whatever degree, and there's a certain draw that they have with whatever products and services they launch, because that represent an extension of themselves, right? I was just catching up on the latest episode of All In on the way here, and they just launched a new drink that is branded as an All In product. All In started as a podcast with the four besties talking 3-4 years ago. I think during COVID they started, and today that brand can extend in so many different ways. And none of these four need the money; they're not doing it for that. But that's just an example of all the possible extensions. And we can go deeper into this, but there are so many ways that you can extend and monetize that personal brand, either as an extension of yourself or as a business where you're the founder, executive, marketing person, whatever it is, right? So I think today, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, if you're a company, LinkedIn will straight up say, okay, you got to advertise to have visibility. Right?
Correct.
So if you take the same piece of content and post it under the out of office show versus posting it as Priya, right? It's night and day, the difference in visibility. Okay. Why? Because LinkedIn will say, as a brand, if you want to stand out, we'll charge you for it. As a person, you want to stand out, we let the audience decide what they like. So today, that disparity hasn't been more pronounced, right? And so more than ever, I think we should be competing for that organic reach.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And if your organic reach is great, you can always supercharge it with dollars. So I'm not against that, right?
Right. So you're saying that, by controlling your narrative and building your brand, which is what personal branding is all about, you're able to also amplify the reach that your businesses or whatever you're standing for, it can have.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay. When you were talking about media figuring out a narrative versus you, the first person that came to my mind was Vijay Mallya.
Vijay Mallya, yeah, that's a good one to talk about, yeah.
So, I mean...
Did you listen to the whole podcast?
Yes, exactly, right? So, if you see, through that podcast, one of the biggest things that he was saying is that I'm not a thief. Translated to English, right? I'm not a thief. But this is exactly what the media has portrayed him as. Do you think this is a good example of what you were just mentioning?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example. The Vijay Mallyas of the world, the Trumps of the world, the Musks of the world, right? Just think about how much of their story and our view of them is shaped by the media, right? Whether that is mainstream or channels that they own, right? And it's an interesting thought experiment to think about how the whole Kingfisher story would have panned out today, right? Mallya is what, in his 70s now, right? But let's say he was today in his 30s or 40s starting a company. How differently he would market the Kingfisher brand, right? Back in the day, it was already ahead of its curve, right? I remember sitting on the first Kingfisher airplane. It's a completely different experience. And then, of course, the whole alcohol business that he was running, was it United Breweries, right? Right? So they were always pushing the limits in terms of marketing, especially in the Indian context, right? And it's very interesting to think about how that will shape out today, right? If you ask me today, I think Vijay Mallya will not only build Kingfisher into a brand that is a maverick brand, but he would also do personal branding from day one. Right, 100%, no doubt about that. Because if you think about it, a large draw of the whole Kingfisher brand was Mallya being the face of it. And back in the day, it was the media showing you the face they want you to see. But today, he would show you directly the face that he wants to be tied with his brand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think he would do personal branding from day one. It's an interesting,
Right.
thing. Yeah.
Right. Because true, that 1 4-hour podcast of Raj Shamane actually showed us a lot more to his life than all the narratives that we've seen on newspapers and magazines
Yeah, let the audience decide. And this concept of doing a 4-hour podcast was unheard of.
Yeah.
The closest was like a late night TV show for like 30-60 minutes, out of which 1/3 was ads.
And where they all played games.
Oh yeah, right.
That's pretty much what they did, right?
So today we were living in a time where you can consume hours and hours of someone, and you can decide for yourself where you want. Of course, the flip side to that is it creates echo chambers. It creates people who may not have a backing in terms of facts have a platform to broadcast their views and everything. But I'm of the opinion that over a long enough time frame, the audience will decide.
Fair point. So now, agree that in today's day and age, personal brand, creating it and tying that with your cause or your business or whatever it is that you want to grow is important. Now, how does a newbie start with doing this? How does a newbie start with creating their personal brand? Thank you so much.
I think, as you mentioned at the start, the first episode we did, a bunch of things went wrong, right?
Yeah.
But you still put it out.
Yeah.
That's the most important
And we got 183 views.
Right?
Come on, guys.
So
Thank you.
that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Put it out.
Yeah.
Right? Show your work.
Yes.
I think most people overthink that. They come up with a growth strategy before their first episode. And that's great. You have a vision and all that, but you've got to start putting things out.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like this idea of iteration in startups, right? You don't get to product market fit without iterating, right? So it's the same thing with content. I remember my first... I've always been fascinated by media and channels and distribution and all that, even before I knew the meaning of these terms, right? As a 10, 11-year-old, I still have a YouTube channel that's out there.
Yeah. I'll tag you.
Yeah.
Can I?
It's I Talk Latest Tech. So if you search up I Talk Latest Tech, the channel's still up. I think it's probably 30, 40 videos.
Yeah.
A mix of, unboxing videos, coding lessons, bunch of things that I was doing, product reviews, right? And those videos are still up. My voice hadn't cracked by then, right? You can imagine, right? Those videos are still up. And I've always, as much as, I have the perfectionist in me and everything has to be a certain way, I've also somehow managed to balance it with this attitude towards just put it out there, be shameless enough, put it out there. People will laugh at you, all of that. They'll think you're trying to become an influencer, all that, right? Even as recent as COVID, I probably had 500 LinkedIn, and today it's 6-7x, right? And back then, my best post in a time where you could get visibility so much more easily. At that time itself, my best post probably got like 8 to 10 likes. And on average, it'll be 3 to 4 likes, right? Way too early to sit and analyze any metrics. Put shit out, right?
Yeah.
Let the audience decide. You'll also figure your style. Your style has evolved since our first episode, right?
Yeah, I was myself.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think there's so much to learn in that process, right? Your niche itself might evolve. Allow yourself to go through that process, and it takes a lot. I started a podcast as well, and I've been carried away with events, and it's not as regular as it was, and so that's why I respect people like you. Like, I remember the conversation we had before the first episode, Box over tea, on you starting the pod, and now you're nearly 20 episodes in. It's amazing. So the most important thing is put it out there, iterate, figure the rest out, ignore the metrics until you have a certain scale. That's a big one, right? Let me just stress on that, right? There's no point analyzing stuff when you have 100, 200 views, right? There's really no point.
Yeah.
Get to a scale where a 1%, a 5% uplift makes a difference. A creator who has 10 million views, it's worth actually getting 10% more engagements because that is a million more views, right? And you can tie that to dollar revenue, right? But when you have 100, 200 views, you're still figuring your style out, and the only people who probably are watching you are your friends and family, right? So I think it's arrogant to sit and look at metrics at that stage. You should just be willing to do stuff until you have enough of a scale where, I have enough numbers now to make sense of it, and I've also evolved my style, and so that's the other thing. Put things out. Ignore the numbers, keep going, figure your style out. And honestly, if you've made it 20, 30 episodes, you're already pretty serious. At that point, the metrics will reveal itself. You'll know what to do to adapt and everything. So this is how I look at it. Just get started.
Just get started. And we spoke about episodes here. So we spoke about something like a podcast to create your personal brand, right? That's one style. What are the other styles that people can do to create their personal brands? What are the other different media, if that's the word? Yeah.
I think some people are amazing at short form content. Some people are amazing at long form. Some people are amazing at instructive type of videos. If you look at the videos, let's say Sadaf does straight to the point, instructive on an Excel.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of TikTokers, a lot of people on Instagram, really good with short form, the Gen Zs of the world. If you look at LinkedIn, you have people who really combine data and analytics, and it's much more insightful points of views where it's less about their face, but a little bit more about the
content.
right. Yeah. So I think, and some people are a combination of all of them. I would consider myself one of them, where I'm not in the top echelon of either of these, but I try to combine these different channels where I do LinkedIn. I have a certain type of content for LinkedIn. I have a certain style on Instagram. What else? TikTok, I probably should get back on. There was a time I tried creating some stuff, but I've been a little irregular. You need to get back. As I believe in what Gary Vee said, like, I don't know, a decade ago, which is he has an unemotional relationship with the platform, right? I don't care what the platform is.
Detachment from
right?
it. Yeah.
10 years ago, LinkedIn was not really a thing,
Yeah.
right? It was just, you connect with people, you maintain a circle. But LinkedIn content and the feed was far less significant. TikTok wasn't a thing 10 years ago, at least outside of China. So platforms will evolve, right? But your style, your skill sets, your niche, that doesn't change.
Yeah, what you talk about mostly.
Yeah. So I'm also very unemotional about the platform. Tomorrow, if something happens to my LinkedIn account, that's cool, right? We'll figure another platform out, you know. These are just mediums. Mediums will change, platforms will evolve, but your content, your niche, your understanding of your audience, your insights, that can be applied on any platform. But of course, there's a certain level of adaptability you need to apply for each platform, which is why I probably need to get better at things like short form content. Because if you're able to get a great number of views on your short form content, that's a great top of the funnel. With that top of the funnel, you will get views for your far more insightful, in-depth 4-hour interviews, whatever you do. So that is super important, and which is why it's one of my things for this year that I want to get better at short form.
Okay. Let's come back to this content media for a bit, because we will tie it back to one important step that we need to do before, or a person needs to do before they start their personal branding journey. What do they talk about? I think this coming to this niche is a challenge for many people. What do you advise? What is a process that you can possibly take to come to this?
Yeah, you actually answered the question in your question itself, which is coming to your niche, right? Allow yourself to come to the niche. Don't start with one. Right? Again, I think it's pure arrogance to start with a niche like that, right? You got to discover your style, discover your audience, get feedback, evolve, know how much the feedback to take, how much to ignore. You will figure your niche eventually if you stay in the game for long enough. It's like, in poker tournaments, the strategy is very different from just a poker night, right? With poker tournaments, the idea is staying in the game long enough, not to just walk away with one big win. So stay in the game long enough and everything will fall in place is my belief. So your niche will reveal itself if you stay interested in the game for long enough, if you have enough to talk about. The audience will be there. Platforms will only circulate you more because audiences are engaged. It's as simple as that. Okay. Right? So your niche will reveal itself if you're in the game for long enough.
So Prahlad, you've been building your personal brand as well for some time. What do you think is your niche? Have you figured it out, or just
yeah, that's a good question. I would say, well, if there's one word that people associate with me, right? I'll see a lot of people get carried away with the brand they represent and all of that. I have a bunch of things on my LinkedIn, but what most people probably know me for is, he's the startup guy, right? That's at best, that's probably how significant you are. One word, startups. People might forget Curate, they may not remember Capita, they'll forget your history, your posts. Oh, but he's a startup guy, So I would say that one word is most of my content, most of my niche, if you will. And if you narrow down a little further, it's been about the regional startup ecosystem. So primarily Southeast Asia. Occasionally I cover wider Asia, I talk about stuff in India as well. Sometimes I might talk about broader concepts that are universal in the startup journey. But I would say if there's one word, it'll come down to startups today. But interestingly, although it's useful to kind of narrow down and double down on one particular area, my interests are wider than that, and I do have points of views on other things, and so.
Tell me more about this.
Yeah, I mean, some of my LinkedIn posts are about different things. It's just like current affairs. I talk a lot about marketing, personal branding on LinkedIn itself, although I'm not an expert. I just share the journey as it's happening. It's like this idea of build in public, if you've heard in the startup world, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is important to 80-90% of your work should be in a certain niche once you figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's good to just express yourself. One of the things I shared with you the last time we caught up was the fact that I want to do a LinkedIn post about the
I was
service
literally
industry.
thinking about this.
Exactly. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
digitalization or over digitalization.
Yeah. Stuff like that I would talk about, which I think that my audience would resonate with, which probably other people are a little, afraid to put out and have a sharp point of view on.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I do, right? I just have a sharp point of view on a lot of things, and this ties in well with a lot of the things I talk about. If you think about this whole idea that I really believe in the age of AI, the age that we're in, soft skills have never been more important, right? Soft skills are hard. This whole branding of soft skills is a misnomer, right? And in this age that we live in, most of what society regarded as hard skills will be automated away or already is.
Yeah.
So what you're left with is soft skills.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's what makes
Talking
you
to
as
someone, building relationships, building rapport, communication, leveraging mediums, soft skills. So I feel like, that post that, I shared with you about on the service industry and people, it ties in very well to that idea of soft skills and communication and how these things are more important than ever.
Yeah.
So occasionally I would, stretch myself with those kind of pieces of content, but most of what I do, I would say, if it comes down to one word, it's startups.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And, talking about what you've been doing with startups and the impression or the image that you've created in Southeast Asia, how much of that do you think impacts your work today at Capita as you're leading growth there?
I mean, it is how I met the Capita team. The Capita, the founders, the key employees in Singapore had been coming for our Curate events, and that's how we built a rapport. And last year, when I was on the lookout, it was a beautiful fit because Capita's entire audience is startups and VCs, and so is Curate's. And so my role at Capita is to lead growth for the region. So it's a combination of marketing, partnerships, biz dev. Ties in very well with everything I'm doing with Curate. And Curate is still alive, the community is growing, and everything I do with Capita is extremely synergistic. So it's how I met the team, and it is I think since I joined, I've only supercharged what I was already doing. The pace at which we're doing stuff has only picked up.
Yeah.
I think we're nearing almost 50 events combined if you think about Curate plus Capita the past 3 years. Yeah, and all of those are focused on founders and VC. So extremely specific audience, most of it in Singapore, but some wider SEA and India. But nearly 50 events, Curate and Capita combined. So I think it's extremely synergistic.
A lot of people, when they've started, let's say they've started building a personal brand from the purpose of finding a job. They might have a overarching goal. It may not be a business that they're running, but they simply want to, let's say, get hired to a specific role. It could be, let's take the example of a software developer. The person starts building things, putting it out on YouTube, putting it out on LinkedIn that they've done this and this. So they're essentially creating their personal brand. And then one day they get hired by, let's say, an AWS or top of the ladder company, tier 1 or whatever company. They stop building their brand after that. They have met their goal. But what I see you do different is that Curate is still very much alive. It is growing. And you've not stopped building your brand just because now, I don't think getting into a company was your primary goal, but I don't know. But point is, should people continue to build their personal brand in today's day and age after they're getting employed? Does it help? Is it too much?
I think it's a personal choice. Today you have platforms where you don't necessarily have to go big or go home, right? You can totally have a side hustle that is completely unrelated to your work. You could be passionate about poker, right? And have a little page about poker and keep that going, and maybe monetize it here and there if you like, but just keep it going as a separate side brand. You could do something related to your work and have a point of view outside of that. And so today, more than ever, you can have a following of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 people and just maintain that instead of only having a large news channel or nothing at all, right? So I don't think you necessarily have to build a top 10 podcast if you want to have a podcast. You can have a podcast where you have 100,000 loyal listeners who love and understand what you do, and maybe the entire total addressable market for your niche is 100,000 people, and that's fine. Today you have platforms that allow you to cater just to that segment. So I think it can either be something tied to your work where you want to extend your personal brand, your point of view, or it can be something totally unrelated. But today you have a platform, and that's the most exciting thing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Do you know of or if you can share certain examples of people who have successfully built their personal brand and monetized it. Anybody?
I'll start with one that is for anyone in the startup and VC world, you would know Harry from 20 VC. Right?
Okay.
20 VC is a podcast where the host Harry talks to different VCs, generally
Okay.
partner level folks.
Yeah.
I think he's a British guy. He started with UK, Europe funds, and I think now he's fairly global.
And he himself is a VC.
He himself, so I'm coming to that, right?
Okay,
He started as a podcaster, and some time ago he started a fund. Right, the guy started a podcast. He spoke to a number of VCs, built his presence within the startup and VC world.
Yeah.
Tons of folks in venture capital listened to him, and in the PE world, and so he eventually started a fund as an extension of the brand. So today there's a 20 VC fund, and they, if you look at their website, they invest in companies that are at the intersection of media and tech. It's perfectly aligned
very
with Harry as
beautiful.
a brand, and so he can get access to deals that many people can't get access to purely because of the platform that he's built. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you think about Naval Ravikant, for instance, the founder of AngelList, right? His style is a little different, where he doesn't actively create content every day or weekly, but when he does appear on other podcasts, he gets millions of views, and that's been a big reason. And of course,
book,
yeah,
which
he's
is
got a
very
book as well, exactly, right? And he's originally the founder of AngelList. Plus, tied to it, if the whole media angle and how out there he is, he gets access to companies that none of us have access to. He got early access to invest in Notion, right? Companies like that. So I think the benefits of being out there and being known within your space, I can't tell you exactly what those benefits would be, but you get access to stuff that others don't. It's an unfair advantage once you have that platform. So Harry is one example that I can think of. He extended the podcast into starting a whole fund, right? Other examples are like Gary Vee, right? For the longest, how he started was he started the wine library, right? To promote his dad's brick and mortar business in wine, right? He took it online for the first time at this point, I think 15, 16 years ago, quite some time ago. He was the first one to, he was investing in search ads well before it was a thing. And then he now runs Vena Media. Vena Media is an advertising agency that competes directly with the big four in advertising. WPP, Publicis, IPG, right? That whole world. He's a relatively new entrant, and he did that purely as an extension of his brand online, where he became the OG for speaking about online marketing and taking advantage of arbitrage, as he calls it, on the platform, where you have a lot of eyeballs and not enough creators. And he teaches you and I how to monetize that, right? And so Gary Vee built that presence up. He started the agency a number of years ago, and now it's competing directly with incumbents in the space. These are examples. And then of course at a much more B2C consumer level, you have folks that there's this popular one where the guy made videos of him just like laying butter on bread, right?
Who?
This is very, very satisfying video of like laying butter on bread, right?
Okay.
And then he kept making these butter videos on TikTok and got millions of views, and eventually launched a butter brand. So there are different scales, and it probably isn't as sticky a business as the agency one, pun intended. But there are different kinds of extensions of your brand. And then the other obvious ones are corporate gigs, speaking gigs, workshops for companies. Those are the ones that we don't hear about as often, but at a micro level, they are super popular, right? You don't have to have millions of followers to start to monetize that. I'll give you an example, right? I did an event on growth marketing about 2 years ago when we were doing events at Draper much more often. Right? And I had this girl, Audrey Chia, who attended the event. She had just left her job at one of the bigger copywriting agencies, and she started posting on LinkedIn on a very specific topic, that is AI tools in copywriting, not even marketing broadly. AI tools for copywriting for digital marketers. She had probably a few hundred connections at the time. It's largely a professional career. She went from few hundred to today over 50,000 followers on LinkedIn. Tons of engagement on all the pieces of content that she does, which is carousel posts, free resources, PDFs, videos, podcasts.
And she just does this full time?
She does this full time now, right? She consults companies, people on their marketing needs, and she's totally building in public. If you go to her website, she actually shows the revenue she's made in real time, right? As a consulting practice. And so that's an example, again, of a beautiful extension. So she was in copywriting for a while. She figured a niche, AI in copywriting. She has a global audience, and she consults companies, gets paid, and then continues to build her top of the funnel to grow her consulting practice. So tons of examples to extend your personal brand. I think once you've really cracked that space, right, that getting to the niche, as you said, is not as straightforward. And once you do that, I think these paths would reveal itself if you're intentional about it.
Very interesting. How could so these are some ideas in the product space, in the market. So we spoke about consulting services and everything. But what if it's something as dry as a person doing financial consulting? How could they think about personal brand as a strategy? See, they're also self-employed in many ways, right? They are either selling insurance or they're selling some sort of a financial product that's backed and underwritten. How do they? It's just a random question that came to my head. But how can they create a personal brand that can eventually drive top of the funnel?
Tons of examples. Let's take real estate agents, right? Google, as you know, charges you based on the keywords that you want to bid for, right? So the model is Google will go to Coke and say, yeah, if you want Coke to appear when someone searches for a drink, we'll charge you $1. And then they'll flip around and tell Pepsi that, hey, you know what? If you pay $1.50, we'll show you. And then Coke will be like, no, I can do $2. Right? And then, so that's the bidding engine, that is search marketing. And so there are certain keywords that are way more valuable than others because of the ROI on it. One of them is real estate. So when you look for a house online, Google charges a lot, few $1,000s for those ad placements, because Google's aware that for the agents advertising, right? Or the agencies that are advertising, all they need is one conversion of $1 million home to make a commission of 20-30 grand. And so what's $1,000 for the ad? So there are certain words that are way more valuable that Google will charge you a bomb for, right? Now, as an individual agent, if you want to stand out, right, in your agency, you can have a personal brand talking about real estate. You can walk around, show different condos, have a point of view, educate people about the, evaluating deals and how to invest and, historical metrics. Or just like going and looking at fancy places, whatever your style is. I'll give you an example. I met someone who deals in real estate in Dubai. He's based in India, but he deals with NRIs. No, not NRIs. He deals with Indians who want to invest outside, and he specializes in Dubai.
Square Yards is, I think, one of those companies.
Right. Yeah. So I met this guy at the NAS Summit. Creators conference just last year, right? Curate was one of the community partners, and so got to meet a lot of those creators. He is one of them, right? And he stands out. On paper, he's a, like you said, financial advisor, an agent, right? But he's at a different league because he has an unfair advantage that none of his agent peers have, which is a distribution channel and a certain presence and a fantastic top of the funnel, out of which he just needs to convert, 1 or 2 homes every quarter or whatever, right? And so yeah. Tons of examples of these. I think all it comes down to is if you're willing to stay in the game for long enough. And honestly, it's not a game for everyone, right? I think just like there's this idea of hustle culture online and everyone should be grinding morning to evening. Just like that, this whole idea of, creator economy also has been blown out of proportion. And so I think over a long enough time frame, the leaders will reveal themselves. And if you're willing to stay in the game long enough, everything. See, because if you are competing with someone like me, who has been creating content well before there was an ROI, right? You will always lose out to someone in your space who's willing to go on creating content without seeing any return. If you think about it. So unless you're obsessed and are really interested in building a large brand, you will always lose out to someone who's willing to do it months on end, years on end, without seeing any ROI on paper. So in a way, this space is it's kind of like the 80-20 rule. Like 20% of creators are creating what 80% of people are consuming online. So I don't think that everyone should be a creator. And honestly, if you want to do it, you can, and you'll burn out within a few weeks, few months. And there are tons of people who keep meeting me and say they want to learn how to do events and stuff. I give them a little advice. They'll burn out in 2-3 months.
So you bring a very interesting point here. Like, for example, let me just take my example. This is comfortable for me. Me sitting with you, talking, recording, uploading, editing, great. You ask me to do events to create my personal brand, I will be like, no.
Yeah, it's kind of like this idea of product market fit or founder market fit, as we stay in startup land, right?
Yeah, so it's founder method fit.
In this case, it's like a creator platform fit or something, some version of that, right?
Yes.
So if you figure that out for yourself, then it's just a question of scaling that and keeping it consistent. But getting to the point where you actually figure that, this is what is repeatable for me and these are the possible extensions of the brand is the challenge. And so if you have already built that decent amount of presence, then scaling it actually becomes, I would say, relatively easier. It's easier to get from 1,000 to 10,000 than 0 to 1,000. That part is where most people drop off. That is in the startup land, we call it the death valley, right? So that's where most companies die. And so same thing with personal brands, right? Yeah. I read a stat, actually not read, someone I met in this Tech in Asia, Jakarta, a few days ago, he's also a podcaster, told me that there's some stat that says that only 1% of podcasts actually survive, right? But if you reach 40 episodes, and that's the mark, right? There's a 50% chance you stay in the game.
Brilliant. That gives me a lot of hope.
Right.
No, I know. Like, I think after our conversation in the last episode, I have declared and released that we are going to hit 100 episodes. That's the milestone we're going for, but at the Out of Office show. So, anyway, coming back to this, very nice conversation on personal branding and the methods that people can use, and we've kind of concluded here that you need to have a proper, especially for personal branding, it has to be a proper creator method or a creator platform for it. You can't go crazy about doing everything. You want to choose a specific method, a specific topic, and you arrive at that topic, right? And then eventually you keep doing it. It's all about consistency. It's all about being in the game so that you're able to create a very effective personal brand. Now let's talk about the second part, which is communities, something that you're fantastic at. I have some ideas also. I'll talk about this towards the end when we talk more about Curate. Okay. So let's start with simply community as a strategy. I know personal brands can extend, but your thoughts on community as a business strategy, business growth strategy. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's one of those things again that a company 20 years ago wouldn't have had access to. Community is an unfair advantage if you can crack, right? So tons of examples of these. If you look at SaaS companies, communities can be a great way to engage with a large pool of your potential users and existing users. Look at communities that companies like Notion have created. They've created a whole, I'm not talking about just their marketplace where you can upload different templates. I'm talking about the actual Notion account on platforms like Reddit that are super engaged, of people talking about how to optimize and create workflows. You look at companies like Figma, right? Another SaaS company that designers use. Yeah. They have a super engaged online community of designers. And Figma, as you know, is a fairly premium product. And so they have a community that's accessible to all. Because you own that top of the funnel, at some point you have enough paid users as well. So I think that community is your top mid of the funnel. And if you can crack that, you can quite easily flip the switch on monetizing because you have that large base that is actually quite difficult to replicate.
Okay. Now, this word community it's a very simple definition. Community is just people who are aligned with certain ideas, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, right? And maybe some actions and activities that they want to do. That's a community, right? Now, there are so many platforms you can create communities on. Online communities, offline communities. Let's break this down. So you gave examples of Figmas and the Notions of the world. How do you start creating a community for your business first? Maybe we can start from there. How do you do this? What platform do you choose? Should it be online? Should it be offline? How would you go about doing it?
So very similar to what I said about starting to create content, right? Whether it's for yourself or for a business, the most important thing here is forget about this obsession with metrics when you're starting. Get started, get enough reps in, right?
What are reps?
Reps are enough pieces of content out there.
Okay.
Right? Consistently enough to try to arrive at your niche.
Okay.
Right? And once that's in place, you can then start to look at the metrics and see where you want to take it. But if you're calculating ROI after 2 events, I think it's foolish. I think it's arrogant at so many levels. It's this. I'm going to rant over here, okay? Because it's the Out of Office show. People are obsessed with numbers and metrics and measurability and attribution. Corporate world, startups world, and honestly, for the analytical minds that we have, it's fairly natural. I love measuring things. I love numbers and everything. But I am also a little delusional enough to do stuff that is immeasurable in the short run that can really shift the needle in the long run, right? And it's an unfair advantage if you're able to do stuff that is that you don't see direct results for, but at a certain scale, suddenly you have an unfair advantage. It's like they call it the tipping point, right? Gladwell coined the tipping point. So yeah, same thing with businesses. When you start to invest in things like content marketing or community, just know that you are competing with tons of people and companies online that are willing to do stuff without seeing an ROI until you do. So you have to be willing to stay in the game long enough and invest without actually seeing much returns initially. right? I've had people who I've sent invites to attend my events, and I think after like 10 invites, they probably show up for the 11th. After they see the consistency, they see the quality of people we attract, they see how curated we are. Some marquee founders attend the events only after that many reach outs, right? Because they also have to see that consistency. They have to see if you're serious. They are being bombarded every day with, oh, come and attend my event. And, if you think about it, like Series A founders in our world, like Series A and above, every SaaS company is trying to sell to them. Everyone will say, come to my seminar on Dash. And it's so obvious it's a sales pitch, right? Which is fine. But just know that there are 5 people like that messaging them every week. So when you start to invest in things like community and content, just give yourself 6 months, 1 year, just get the reps in, put out 100 pieces of content and then say content marketing doesn't work. Do 50 events and then say that, yeah, there's no ROI. If you do 2 and give up and you can't attribute anything, you don't have any scale to attribute.
Yeah. Okay. How do we create community?
How do we create community? Yeah.
It's a broad question.
I think, so I was talking to, this was about 2 years ago at this point. At that time, the president of Thai Singapore, right, Amit Gupta.
Okay.
And he was saying, now he's in the board of directors and somebody else has taken over for Prantik. Has taken over Singapore, right?
Yeah.
So, but he was saying, we were talking about community early days and Thai obviously has a super engaged community. And so I was asking him and this exact same question, and he was like, the mark of a great community is when you see people enabling outcomes for each other, people helping each other within your community.
And you as a community manager is nowhere in picture.
Right? So you build a platform where there's enough of those collisions and cross-pollinations happening, right?
And it's not in one platform that you're building this, right? It's cross-platform usually.
I mean, it depends. There are purely online communities. There are purely in-person communities. There are super curated. If you look at Podium, that is a community of women in tech, women entrepreneurs, women investors, women in finance. The founder of Podium, we just caught up. She's based in Jakarta now, but she does events across the globe. And Podium is hardly a year old. They've built up such an engaged community, and each one of their events are not more than 8 women together. Right, so there are different styles. Right, if you look at their,
it's a very
close thing. So they may not have as much online chatter, but their events are super curated like that. Right,
super IRL.
Right, member led that too. Right, and now they're at a point where thinking of hiring a person to facilitate these things, which is quite a challenge, right? A person to be the face. But until now, it's purely member led. There are obviously online communities. The examples we spoke about in the SaaS world, in Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and then of course there are communities like ours, which is kind of a combination of both. We use WhatsApp. We obviously
like Curate. You mean?
Yeah, Curate, LinkedIn, and we do at least 1 to 2 events every month.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think again I'm a little unemotional about the platform and medium.
Yeah.
But if you're able to start to see outcomes that members are enabling for each other, or your audience is enabling for each other, then you can kind of take credit as a platform that could be one of the attributes for the outcome. So the Curate example, we have tons of folks who have joined us over the past 2-3 years, and we start to see outcomes like, A invests in B, right? A partners with B to start a company. C is hired to join A and B, who all at some point met at a Curate event. Right?
Do you guys do events nowadays in Curate as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Curate and Capita both. Yeah.
Okay. So your strategy is combining what we have on WhatsApp, right? The list that so that's one of the value propositions of the Curate community, where you offer all curated high quality events on Sunday, and I got your messages right before the show. So you do that and you enforce it or reinforce the brand with events.
Correct. Yeah. Ours is a very different community. Most people think of community is a chat room. And most are.
And most gaming communities, Web3 communities are this. And they can be very, very sometimes.
I think I have hundreds of unread messages on my WhatsApp. Most of them are groups, right? The people I generally get back to. But most of the muted ones are groups, right? I think those are groups. They are not communities.
What's the difference?
Major difference. Yeah, I mean, groups are just people talking to each other, which is all fine and great. We have groups of our school alumni, your co-workers, people in your space.
Yeah.
But communities are, like I said, when there are actual outcomes that you can start to see, whether that's online or offline or some combination of both. And it's not just people chattering with each other. The role of the moderator, the host, the owner of that community is much more critical.
Tell me a little bit more about this. What would the role of the owner be to create a community that is effective like this, where people are helping out each other or doing things or...
I mean, in Curate's case, a large part of what I do is even Curate and Capita both, right? We're going after the same audience of founders and investors, and in Capita's case, CFOs and CHROs as well. For every one of the events that we do, I still personally look through every single sign up. So even when it's as high as during FinTech Festival last year, we did one 800 signups on Luma. I look through each one of the signups, look through each one of the LinkedIn links or the profiles of people who sign up. And then I decide whether they're approved or rejected. For everything else, I depend on the team, interns, right? AI agents. But in terms of curating the audience for the events, I still do it personally, and it doesn't take more than a few hours for every event. It's not crazy, right?
What does that lead to?
What's that?
What does that lead to?
That leads to creating a great experience for people who come. Creates tremendous word of mouth. If you think about it, the most effective, not most effective, the most targeted form of advertising is not LinkedIn, Google, or any of these platforms. It's word of mouth.
Yeah.
Right. So you build this reputation where people talk about the engagements that you're doing, your brand is doing, and you build this. That's what a brand is. You start to associate with high quality events, people in tech, people in startups. That's my niche, but whatever it is for you as a community, that's one of the roles that a host can play, right? And the curation is super important to us. We reject 50 to 70% of people who apply. And we make sure that people who are coming are not just selling to my audience. You know what I mean? So that is one of the key roles, and that's why it's named Curate. Right? But curation, I think, is an important aspect in most communities, I would say. Curation is critical.
Right. Okay. Okay, let's get an audience question in. So, to the community of Curate, what are you bringing to this audience in terms of value proposition?
The answer is slightly different for Curate or Capita. Which one do you want me to do?
Both you answer.
Okay.
First.
Because the audience is very similar. It's folks in the startup community. With Curate, interestingly, we have done only a few paid events. Most of the events that we monetize were through sponsors.
Okay.
Right? So in my particular case...
Explain this a bit.
Yeah. So anyone who wants to sell to startup founders or investors.
Okay.
A SaaS product, a service, VCs. You want to build your presence within a targeted segment that is Southeast Asia, startup founders and investors.
Yeah.
Curate's a place to be.
Right. Got it.
Right. So
if I have a company and I want to get a whole bunch of founders to sign up on my platform, then I come to Curate.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Like last year, one of the bigger sponsors we had was HubSpot for startups. They were building their presence in APAC. It made sense to go after the exact curated demographic that is founders, and ours was the best fit, where I kept it free for the audience, tried to attract the highest quality of audiences we can, but made your money through the sponsors. The online version of that for many people could be, if you have a podcast, most podcasts, the classical way to monetize is at some point you have sponsors.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So same thing, where your asset then is the attention and engagement of your audience.
Okay. And now for Capita, how does that change? Because this is...
For Capita, it's very clear, right? Capita is in the business of cap table and ESOP management. So it is important to build that top of the funnel awareness across the ecosystem. Of course, most of our paying customers are growth stage startups. So trying to attract as many of those as possible is critical. Engaging with the HR and finance community to have much more technical discussions, right? That's super critical. And so all that is thought leadership for Capita. Ultimately, that ties directly into the products and services that we offer. Yeah.
Okay, so in this case, Capita's products and services and the value proposition that it's totally offering is the thing that you're bringing to this highly targeted community that Capita is also building through you, right? Okay, yeah, okay. So it's just a different sense of a business model, right? Where you've got, you are as a community manager, you're working and building your community of people who you resonate with or whatever it is. In this case, curating VCs or curating startup founders, and you have the sponsors. Sponsors are SaaS companies or companies who are selling to them. Either you take a sponsorship from them, or in this case of Capita, they are owning the community. They are on your sites. They've they're not necessarily sponsoring you, but they are sponsoring you through a different medium.
Correct, yeah. So the Notion, Figma examples are quite similar, right?
Right.
Communities of design professionals, things like that.
Yeah. And the value that these guys get, not just in terms of tools, but you're also things like education and stuff can come, things like building a community where they can, like a designer can find a customer can find another customer, is what is enabled through this community.
Absolutely.
This leads into an idea that I have been thinking about quite a bit, not specifically for Out of Office Show, but I think it's a VC idea where, so my parent company is Innovative, and Innovative does a lot of product development services. So Innovative does a lot of product development and services and things like that. While that is every dev shop out there in the world can do it, how does Innovative become different? And this is what we were thinking about is, if we can take equity in a company and do the work, be a CTO plus product team, take the equity in our company and not really charge them upfront in cash. Now, for us, it is important that we know that this risk that we're taking that actually makes sense, which is basically we're being an investor without putting cash upfront, but we're putting services upfront, right? So we're doing these things. My thought was, what if now it makes sense to take probably it makes sense to just do purely equity returns and no cash for a business or a founder who's starting things up but has a community and is selling to that community.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's the only requirement. It's not about whether your business plan is strong or how many competitors, what's your TAM, the usual VC metrics. But instead, the only requirement is you have an engaged, highly curated community. You have a product idea that can actually sell, that will actually benefit this community massively, that, the moment you bring it in, we know that, okay, the community is going to either be on it or get yada to be on it, right? And that will be the growth. Those kind of ideas, you need a tech platform if that's the product that you're thinking. If you're thinking about selling shampoo, that's a different thing. We can't do that. But if it's a tech platform, then that's an idea that we should go 100% in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if we are charging 30-40K to build that product, we take $0 and we just take 30-40K worth of equity. What do you think of this?
I think it's a beautiful idea. At a personal level, I've had built products before, had startups, and I think even though they didn't really scale beyond a point, and they're failed startups. The one thing that's different now from a few years ago for me is the platform, is the audience, and it's a certain amount of insight that you have about that audience, that segment. And again, the one word there is startups. That world, in this part of the world, I understand very well. And whenever I'm going to build something again, which I will, the difference this time is I'll have hundreds, thousands of beta users ready. Right? As we spoke about on the first show, first-time founders obsess over product. Second-time founders think distribution first. And I'm totally in that zone right now.
What was the third thing?
Extension. It's funny. J. Cal from the All In Pod, right? He was in town recently, and we were talking about third-time founders. There's this meme online trending a while ago. Third-time founders do neither of these. They do personal branding on LinkedIn right away. All right.
I love it. That wraps up a lot of this.
Right. Exactly. But back to what I was saying. What was I saying?
We were talking about product community, and you were going to build something.
Yeah, so the difference this time is when I am ready to start something, build something again, and iterate. I have tons of people who are ready and engaged to try out something, an early version of a product that may not be fully up to the mark.
Yeah.
But are so engaged and and associate with the brand enough to give us authentic feedback and to allow us to iterate and get to that point, which is a real asset if you think about it. So I totally get your model. I think you should definitely look for companies like that. Look for people, brands, or even companies that quite frankly have raised a lot of dollars and are ready to market. As long as you have that platform organically or otherwise, it makes sense to do it to do it for equity. And this is kind of the model that companies like Mission Plus are using, right? Nick and Ned, right? So I think it's totally that. There is also an argument for, how relevant product is and how important MVPs are in the age that we're in, with things like vibe coding, and if you've looked at the new wireframing tools and all that. But that's a separate discussion. I think this general idea of helping early stage founders by taking equity and being a fractional tech or product person makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So you were talking about curate, and you were talking about how you understand your audience very well, right? At this point in time. And it's been a journey with you creating curate and understanding who is there in this space. So what do you understand about the startup world through curate today that may be an unfair advantage to you compared to somebody else who's probably in the startup world but doesn't have a community like curate?
I mean, you spend long enough in any space, and you start to see who the real winners are. When I just got started, used to be fascinated by people who raise a lot of money. During the peak ZERP era, there were tons of companies who raised in the tens of millions, right? How many of them are still around? So you start to put people on less of a pedestal and just start to see them for who they are, start to get concerned about a little bit more of the fundamentals of business and not vanity metrics like the classic one being raising capital. So today, whether it's, I talk in a very similar way to somebody who's a Series B founder who's raised over 100 mil, and somebody who's just getting started and trying to raise their first angel round. And I'm able to see more clearly the essence of what they're building in the space they're building, instead of being clouded with all the vanity stuff. So which is part of that insight I'm telling you about in the space, right? So that I would say is the biggest difference.
Nice. When it comes to VCs, and because you're in this space and you're in the startup world space, right? What do you know about VCs in Southeast Asia particularly? And how are they different from VCs in Silicon Valley or EU?
So firstly, I haven't spent time in the Valley, right? But from what is out there,
I feel like you will love the Valley.
I will, right? Yeah. A lot of people have been telling me. A close friend of mine, who's interestingly a founder coach, he said the two places you really got to go, right? China and the Valley.
I've gotten the Valley thing a lot. I haven't gotten China yet, but yeah. Okay.
But see, if you think about most of the funds in SF was started by operators, founders, who have built and sold something, have capital to invest, start a fund, get LPs, and get going, right? In this part of the world, because we are going through our second, third wave of startups, there aren't that many big exits yet that enough founders are running funds. A lot of funds are run more institutionally with people from a corporate finance background, right? The way you think about portfolio construction and investing in companies is very different. The time horizon in which you want to invest is very different. The way you evaluate companies is very different. And so that I would say is the biggest difference, where in the Valley, most of the funds are started by ex-operators, whereas over here, you can't say the same thing. And I'm not saying 100% of the funds in SF are started by founders. If you look at Sequoia most famously, Sequoia is a name brand VC. It's not started by a founder. Look at the story. So there are obviously outliers in every region. But I would say for the most part, the biggest difference I see is over here. Unless you already have a certain level of track record, you might be pitching to someone who's an ex-McKinsey person. There's nothing wrong with being a consultant, but it's very different the way you look and evaluate companies.
Yeah, definitely very different. We've had a couple of McKinsey people on this show.
Oh yeah.
But interesting, there is a hypothesis that I have, and you tell me if it is true.
Corrected. Former McKinsey.
Former McKinsey people, sorry. Former McKinsey people on the show. Okay, so this hypothesis that I have is that there are, in the Valley versus cities like Singapore, even cities like New York, you can put them, or London or Mumbai. I would put Silicon Valley, SF, and Bangalore probably in the same category. But the stark difference that I see is that one are P&L cities, where all the metrics often come from the profit and loss statement, the cash flow statement, the risk-taking abilities of a VC, of an LP, family office, and whatever it is that out there. Compared to Silicon Valleys, and I don't know if Bangalore is as compared, but Silicon Valley is where they are investing in a completely whole new wild west
Yeah.
future. It's not necessarily a P&L investment. They believe a lot more in that, okay, like things like communities. They believe a lot more that if you have this, then that can actually tilt the valuation of a company. You say that to a VC from one of these P&L cities, I don't think having a community will add value to the company right now. What do you feel about this?
For the most part,
hypothesis?
what you said is true. There are outlier examples of community-led businesses that do raise a significant amount of capital in this part of the world. But yeah, for the most part, the risk appetite, given the profile of funds and networks of investors out there, tend to be a little bit more conservative, let's say.
P&L.
But again, it's all a function of the maturity of the ecosystem. As we have more exits, if you think about like Antler, started by one of the guys is ex Lazada, part of the Lazada mafia, right?
Yeah.
One of the biggest exits in the region. So when you have that kind of capital, you can take bigger swings and bigger bets. And so I think what we should optimize is more exits, larger exits, and once there's enough liquidity and cash in the system, there will always be mavericks who want to invest in cooler stuff in this part of the world. Yeah.
Do you think Southeast Asia is getting there?
Yeah, I think so. I'm very optimistic.
Okay. Fantastic.
I think Southeast Asia and Asia in general is at a point where there are enough of US funds that have been established here to invest in Asia, like starting from a decade plus ago, just because you can't get that kind of growth in more mature Western markets, right? The lot of the tech investors. But now we're at a point where there are so many more regional funds that have been started that approach things very differently. It's not just the SF model that you're trying to replicate. And I think Asia is slowly coming to its own version of what VC investing should look like. And maybe that isn't the Silicon Valley model. The Japanese have a very different model, for instance, and certain European companies have very different models. So I think SEA and India and Asia as a whole, China, which has a different model. So I think we're at a point where there's enough capital, there's enough people building homegrown funds, and we're coming to a different value, a different version of what venture capital investing should look like.
Give me a sense of what this version is.
One of my favorite examples is Tin Man Capital.
I've been following them.
Yeah, exactly. Jeremy has a great personal brand, right? And they take community and content very seriously. They're quite an unconventional fund. They do only Series A. They only lead. They only take a board seat, right? And most founders, meet funds that typically don't lead and only follow. And so Tin Man's quite different, very very specific. And their entire thesis is that instead of chasing for unicorn exits, right, in their portfolio and hunting for unicorns, they are completely okay making just a few bets, super concentrated, and actively working with the founders on a weekly basis to shape those companies. And they are completely cool with getting low to mid, high double digit, low 9-digit kind of exits instead of just one unicorn exit that pays for all your losses that's the Tin Man model. They only do B2B SaaS in traditional industries that you're trying to change. And so very specific mandate. They've made, I don't know, around 10 investments. It's not that many the past 6 years. So that's one example of a slightly unconventional point of view that has been magnified through the personal brand of Jeremy and Murli. Yeah. And that's an example of creating a different model of what venture investing should look like in SEA.
Yeah, and it's very different from the power law that
exactly. So early days to see, but these are examples of funds that are much more attuned with what the actual ecosystem looks like as opposed to importing a model and then trying to find an audience for it.
What's next for Curate?
For Curate, I mean, I'll just comment on what's next for me in general, if that's okay. Like Curate, Capital, all of it is connected.
Yeah.
I would say definitely want to continue to grow the presence online, continue to grow the community, all that.
Yeah.
But I want to get much more strategic about what that looks like, right? Just like the story of Audrey that I shared, right? I feel like we're at that tipping point where now is the right time to actually 10x it, right? To go from 5,000-6,000 followers to 50,000 next year this time. What does that look like? Breaking that down into a month-wise plan and posting with a certain consistency, since we have cracked that insight and engagement with our audience and the different types of formats, right?
Yeah.
Long form, short form, infographics, all of that.
Your shirt is coming up on it.
So that's one overarching interest of mine.
Yeah.
What is specifically different now, mid 2025, that we're speaking? AI.
Yeah.
I'm very interested to see what role AI plays for creators, the creator economy.
Yeah.
Every weekend we watch memes as a family, right? That I curate, right? And lately, I would say good 20-30% of the memes we're watching are AI generated
Nice. Yeah.
in regional Indian languages, Tamil,
Yeah,
Malayalam,
yeah.
Hindi.
Yeah. Have you seen these AI videos?
They are amazing.
Where you've got a monkey going
are
around.
amazing.
I love those.
They are amazing,
I
right?
love those.
So I'm very, very intrigued by this trend. It doesn't scare me. It's actually super exciting. And I want to figure out just how AI fits in. How should we leverage AI in content creating and media in general? What is that right combination? I've evaluated none of these AI content marketing bots and AI agents, so to speak, right? None of them I actually pay for, right? We evaluate them as a company, we do, right? But none of them actually creates content that has a soul. It's vanilla content. Content is not just words put together. Some of the parts is always lower than the whole. And what is that whole? What is that delta? That I feel is authenticity. That's speaking in a way that is actually the reader feels like I get you. Like I feel understood by this person, this company, this brand. So how can we leverage AI but also have that right amount of authenticity coming out? So that mix I want to try and figure out and get a little bit more strategic about how to grow that brand online, but also what is the role that AI plays in that.
Fantastic. Amazing. I'm super excited about what happens to curate what we're going to see next. As we discussed, and through the Out of Office show, I'm also brainstorming a lot of things about what we do with Footprint IQ, what we do with Innovative. What does the world look like eventually with AI? I think AI is going to be the Jarvis of Iron Man.
I don't watch any Marvel, so I didn't get that, but the audience would.
Basically, Jarvis is this suit that Iron Man wears that gives him immense power. It's an intelligence, the intelligence itself, and that's embedded in the suit, right? And it's a beautiful podcast actually by one of the initial creators of AI in OpenAI, who he explains it in this way. So you've got AI who's your supporter and makes you as a superhuman.
I see.
And then even Iron Man, so the same outfit that he wears, which is the AI itself, can find him whenever he needs the support, right? Now that is being completely autonomous. That's completely autonomous AI. We're at this stage where we are more using it as, we have to still figure out how to use this as a suit that can make us better. And that analogy.
I want to add to this. Recently, I came across, I forget where I first heard this. I came across this concept. It's very interesting. Adding to what you said.
Yeah.
Most people are concerned about, have we reached AGI? Is AI sentient? And is AI conscious and all of that? And if you remember, there was this moment, right, where people were speculating whether OpenAI has cracked it or something like that about a few months ago, if you recall, right?
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. There is this concept that is, the Turing effect, the Turing test.
Yes.
To test how human-like computers are, right? There is also a reverse Turing test, which is very interesting. I came across recently, which is this idea that humans are increasingly sounding robotic. So I'm quite fascinated by this, and this is something that I'm way more concerned about than the former.
Because humans are very fast learners.
Right? I want to see, I want to see how much more robotic people get and how people change this idea of what soft skills are and what skills matter, and how we can embrace our humanness and authenticity in this new age. So this is also something I'm increasingly fascinated by, where I'm not as concerned about the peaks that AI will reach.
Yeah.
More concerned about are we being as human as we can be.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. With that, we're coming to the last question of the show. So what are your final thoughts, or what are your final piece of advice to people who are looking to create the personal brand, create communities, figure out events?
Get started, ignore the numbers.
Ignore the numbers.
Stay in the game.
Nice. With that, thank you so much.
All right, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Prahlad, for joining us on the show. Yeah, we'll see you soon. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, please do comment and keep watching the Out of Office show.